Linda, do not touch that cart. Those were the first words out of my mouth at 6:17 on a Tuesday morning, and by then she already had one hand on the steering wheel. I had been standing in my kitchen with a mug of coffee when the faint electronic reverse beeper drifted through the open garage door. At first, my brain filed it under neighborhood noise. Pinebrook Lakes woke up early. Sprinklers clicked before sunrise, landscaping trucks rolled through by 7, and somewhere a garage door was always groaning open. Then I heard the electric motor. My electric motor. I set the coffee down hard enough to splash it across the counter and walked into the garage. Morning air carried the wet smell of St. Augustine grass and warm Florida pavement. My dark blue utility cart was halfway out of the driveway. Linda Crawford, president of the Pinebrook Lakes Homeowners Association, sat behind the wheel wearing a pale blue polo, white slacks, and sunglasses pushed into her blonde hair. She looked at me like I had interrupted her. "Community inspection," she said. "I will bring it back." I stared at her. "That is my cart. I know whose it is, Ryan." She said my name with the patient tone people use when explaining something obvious to a child. "The association needs transportation this morning. My name is Ryan Mitchell. I am 44 years old, and I have spent most of my adult life maintaining electric equipment for golf courses around Orlando. That cart was not HOA equipment. I had bought it used 18 months earlier, rebuilt the electrical system myself, replaced the batteries, repaired the suspension, and configured it for hauling tools and landscaping supplies around my property. Linda knew that because she had asked to use it before. I had said no. Apparently, she had decided my answer had an expiration date. "Park it," I said. "Now." Her mouth tightened. "You can complain at the next board meeting." Then the cart rolled away. I stood at the edge of my driveway watching the red taillights disappear past 2 rows of palms. Every instinct told me to grab my truck and follow her. I did not. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Vehicle movement detected. I opened the manufacturer app. A small GPS marker moved east along Cypress Bend Drive at 9 miles per hour. I watched it pass the community pool, turn toward Lakeview Circle, and continue toward the clubhouse. Under the map sat the cart information I knew better than Linda ever could: battery level, location history, system status, and one control she had never seen: remote immobilization. I did not touch it. The cart was moving, and I was not interested in creating a hazard just to prove a point. Instead, I walked back into the garage and looked at the empty rectangle of concrete where it had been parked. A damp tire mark crossed the driveway. My coffee was still sitting on the kitchen counter. The security camera above the garage had captured everything. Linda thought she had just taken a convenient ride because an HOA title gave her permission. What she did not understand was that every foot that cart traveled was leaving a record. By 7 o'clock, my cart was back in the driveway like nothing had happened. Linda left it crooked across the concrete, keys still in the ignition, with wet grass stuck to the tires and the battery 6% lower than when she took it. I stood beside it with my coffee reheated for the second time and opened the trip history on my phone. 3.7 miles. Driveway to clubhouse, clubhouse to Lakeview Circle, a slow loop past the community pool, then home. Every stop had a timestamp. Every turn had a location. That was the thing about machines. People remembered events the way they wanted to remember them. Machines recorded what happened. I learned that after 22 years working on electric equipment for golf courses around Orlando. My days smelled like rubber, battery terminals, hot pavement, and whatever fertilizer the ground's crew had spread before sunrise. I could diagnose a charging problem by watching voltage under load, rebuild a worn suspension, trace an electrical fault through a wiring harness, and tell when somebody had abused a cart before they admitted it. My own cart had started as a faded fleet vehicle I bought from a course replacing older equipment. I spent 8 months rebuilding it in my garage. New battery system, fresh cables, better shocks, utility bed, lights, tires. I kept the serial number, purchase documents, registration paperwork, maintenance receipts, and manufacturer records inside a gray envelope in the cabinet above my workbench. The GPS system came later. I installed the supported module because I carried expensive tools and sometimes left the cart near job sites. The app showed battery status, trip history, location, and system alerts. It also included remote immobilization, a factory-supported security function designed to prevent unauthorized use. I had tested it exactly twice, both times while the cart was parked in my garage. I never imagined the feature would matter inside my own neighborhood. That morning, I downloaded the trip log before leaving for work. Then I opened the security camera recording. 6:16 and 48 seconds. Linda entered my driveway. 6:17 and 11 seconds. She climbed into the cart. 6:17 and 34 seconds. I appeared from the garage. The camera had no trouble capturing our exchange. I saved the clip in a folder labeled Tuesday. Before pulling out in my truck, I photographed the cart exactly where Linda had left it. Maybe that sounded excessive. In my line of work, it was ordinary. If a golf course superintendent told me a machine failed by itself, I documented the condition before touching a wrench. Never guess what a machine did when the machine can tell you. At lunch, I sent Linda a short email. I told her clearly that the cart was privately owned, that she did not have permission to use it, and that neither she nor any HOA representative was authorized to remove it from my property. I asked her to confirm she understood. Her answer arrived at 1:43. Ryan, association officers occasionally require reasonable access to equipment available within the community for operational purposes. Your cooperation is appreciated. I read it twice beneath the Florida sun. She had taken my cart without permission, returned it, and somehow written an email thanking me for cooperating. I saved that too. Linda Crawford had spent 3 years turning Pinebrook Lakes into her own little government, and the strangest part was how ordinary she made it look. Most mornings, I saw her before I left for work, cruising the neighborhood in the association golf cart with a clipboard beside her and sunglasses pushed into her blonde hair. She photographed garbage cans left out 30 minutes too long, measured grass near sidewalks, inspected mailbox paint, and stopped beside parked vehicles as if she were conducting a federal investigation instead of driving through a Florida subdivision. She always called it protecting property values. The rest of us called it Tuesday. My problems with Linda started months before she touched my cart. During a neighborhood cleanup event, she walked into my open garage while I was organizing tools and stopped beside the dark blue utility cart. The association could use something like this, she said, running her eyes over the utility bed. I told her where I bought it and assumed she was making conversation. Then she said, "You should donate it for community events." I laughed because I genuinely thought she was joking. She was not. "I use it for work," I said. "Then loan it to us when you are not working." No, that should have ended the conversation. Instead, Linda looked toward the street and said, "Everything visible from the common road affects the community, Ryan." 1 week later, I received a violation notice because my workbench was supposedly visible from the street when the garage door was open. I moved nothing. The notice disappeared after I asked the management company to identify the rule I had violated. A month later, she cited my utility trailer because one tire touched the edge of the driveway expansion. I corrected that before sunset. Then came a warning about 2 empty mulch bags beside my garage for less than an afternoon. None of those things mattered individually. Together, they taught me something about Linda. She did not like hearing no. The Tuesday she took my cart, I assumed she had finally pushed her authority farther than usual. Then I checked my camera archive. I was sitting at my workbench that evening with the ceiling fan pushing warm air around the garage when I searched backward through motion alerts. Thursday, 3 weeks earlier, 7:26 in the morning. Linda walked into my driveway while my truck was gone. She climbed into the cart and disappeared for 29 minutes. I opened the GPS history. Same date, same time. A 2.4-mile loop through Pinebrook Lakes. I checked another morning. Nothing. Then another. There she was again, 11 days earlier, using the cart for 16 minutes while I was working across town. I stopped scrolling. This had not started Tuesday. Tuesday was simply the first time I caught her in person. I downloaded both clips, saved the matching trip histories, and added them to the folder with her email claiming reasonable access to equipment. Then I sent one more message. Please provide the exact section of the governing documents that authorizes an HOA officer to use privately owned equipment without the owner's permission. Her response arrived the next morning. She did not provide a section number. She sent me a violation notice about my trailer. The trailer notice told me exactly what I needed to know. Linda was not going to answer the question because she could not point to a rule that gave her permission to take my cart. I printed the notice anyway and placed it beside her email on my workbench. Outside, an afternoon thunderstorm rolled across Pinebrook Lakes, rain hammering the garage roof while the air smelled like wet concrete and hot rubber. I opened the community governing documents on my laptop and searched every section dealing with association access, maintenance, emergencies, common property, private lots, and board authority. Nothing gave an HOA officer permission to borrow a homeowner's vehicle or equipment simply because it was accessible. I read the relevant sections twice. Then I stopped arguing with Linda. Instead, I built a timeline. First, unauthorized trip. Thursday morning, 3 weeks earlier. Camera footage showed Linda entering my driveway at 7:26. GPS showed the cart traveling 2.4 miles. Second trip, 11 days earlier. 16 minutes of movement while my truck was 20 miles away at a golf course maintenance job. Third trip, Tuesday at 6:17, the morning I confronted her directly. I added screenshots of each GPS route, copies of the security recordings, and the email where I explicitly denied permission. Then I photographed the cart's serial number, purchase paperwork, and manufacturer information. The gray ownership envelope went into the same folder. I also checked the cart from front to back. Tires, steering, suspension, battery connections, lights, utility bed. Nothing was damaged. That mattered to me. This was not about inventing harm that had not happened. It was about Linda repeatedly deciding that my property became available whenever she wanted it. Finally, I opened the manufacturer manual for the security system. The remote immobilization feature was exactly what I remembered. It was designed to prevent unauthorized operation after the vehicle was stationary. I tested it that evening with the cart parked inside my garage. Key on. Display awake. Drive system disabled through the app. Then I restored normal operation. One electronic chime, and everything worked again. I saved the relevant manual page with the rest of my records. The next morning, Linda drove past my house in the HOA cart at 7:10. She slowed near my driveway, looked toward my garage, and kept going. I did not wave. At 9:30, another email arrived from the management company about my trailer. I responded with photographs showing it complied with the published parking requirements and asked for written confirmation. By lunch, the notice was withdrawn. Linda never mentioned my question about private equipment. That evening, I parked my utility cart exactly where I normally kept it, inside my driveway beside the garage. I did not hide it. I did not leave a special invitation. I did not alter anything. I simply made sure the camera was recording and the GPS system was working normally. If Linda respected the written notice, nothing else would happen. If she ignored it, I would not need to argue about what she had done. The camera would know when she entered my property. The GPS would know where she went. And if she parked somewhere safe before trying to use my cart again, the machine had one more way of reminding her who actually controlled it. For 4 days, nothing happened. My cart stayed exactly where I left it, and I started wondering whether the written warning had finally reached Linda in a language she understood. Then Saturday morning arrived. At 8:42, I was standing inside my kitchen cutting a bagel when my phone vibrated against the counter. Vehicle movement detected. I looked through the window toward the driveway. Empty space. The cart was gone. I opened the security camera feed before touching anything else. Linda had entered my driveway less than 2 minutes earlier wearing her pale blue HOA polo, white slacks, and sunglasses. She looked toward my front door, stepped into the cart, turned the key, and drove away. No knock. No phone call. No permission. I saved the clip immediately, then opened the GPS map. The marker moved north along Cypress Bend Drive at 8 miles per hour. I watched it pass Lakeview Circle, slow near the community pool, then continue toward the clubhouse. My thumb rested beside the immobilization control, but I did not press it. The cart was moving. I waited. At 8:48, the marker entered the clubhouse parking lot. 8:49, it stopped. I watched the status screen. Speed, 0. Drive system idle. Parking state confirmed. I gave it another full minute. The marker did not move. At 8:50, I opened the security menu and selected remote immobilization. The app asked for confirmation. I checked the vehicle status one more time. Stationary. Then I confirmed. The green system indicator changed to security lock active. That was it. No sparks. No mechanical drama. No damaged equipment. The cart simply would not engage its drive system the next time someone tried to operate it. I set my phone on the counter and finished making breakfast. 11 minutes later, it rang. Linda. I let it ring twice before answering. Ryan, your cart is malfunctioning. Her voice had that clipped tone she used during board meetings when somebody questioned a violation. Where is it? I asked. Silence for half a second. At the clubhouse. I looked through my kitchen window at the empty driveway. Interesting. I left it. At my house. Do not start this again. I am conducting an official property inspection, and the cart will not move. How did it get to the clubhouse? Another pause. I used it because association transportation was unavailable. After I told you in writing that you did not have permission? Her voice hardened. Your personal interpretation of board authority does not control association operations. I almost smiled at that. The cart is privately owned, Linda. Then come fix it. There is nothing broken. That finally stopped her. I could hear faint voices behind her and the hiss of sprinklers somewhere near the clubhouse landscaping. What did you do? She asked. I picked up the gray ownership envelope from the counter. I secured my property. She said she was calling the board and community security. Please do, I answered. When the call ended, I grabbed my folder, my phone, and the cart documents. Linda thought she was about to report me for interfering with HOA business. She had no idea she was about to create the first official record confirming exactly where my cart was and exactly who had taken it there. The clubhouse was less than a mile from my house, but by the time I pulled into the parking lot, Linda had already assembled an audience. Her white sport utility vehicle sat near the entrance. 2 board members stood beside the walkway, and a Pinebrook Lake security officer was talking with her next to my dark blue cart. The cart had not moved. I checked my phone before getting out of the truck. Speed, 0. Security lock active. Exactly where I had left the system. Florida heat was already rising off the pavement, and the sprinklers along the clubhouse lawn threw a fine mist into the sunlight. Linda spotted me and pointed toward the cart. There he is. He remotely disabled association equipment during an official inspection. I closed my truck door and walked over carrying the gray ownership envelope in my document folder. Association equipment? I asked. Equipment being used for association business, she corrected. The security officer looked between us. Who owns the vehicle? I do, I said. Linda answered almost at the same time. That is not the issue. I opened the gray envelope and handed over the purchase record, serial number documentation, and manufacturer registration information. The officer compared the serial number on the paperwork with the identification plate beneath the cart seat. Match. One of the board members, Thomas Reed, frowned at Linda. Did Ryan give you permission to take this today? Linda folded her arms. The association has operational authority when transportation is required for inspections. I pulled out the email I had sent 4 days earlier. This is my written notice telling her she does not have permission. Then I showed them her response. Thomas read it twice. What section of the governing documents gives us this authority? Linda's jaw tightened. We are not going to conduct a legal seminar in a parking lot. The security officer asked when the cart had arrived. I opened the GPS history. 8:42, movement began at my address. 8:49, vehicle stationary at the clubhouse. 8:50, security lock activated. Then I opened the camera clip showing Linda entering my driveway and driving away. Nobody spoke while the video played. Linda finally said, he intentionally trapped association personnel by disabling transportation. After it was parked, I said, I showed the officer the status log and the manufacturer manual describing the immobilization feature. The cart was stationary for more than a minute before I secured it. Thomas looked at Linda again. Why did you take it after he specifically told you not to? She ignored him and turned toward the security officer. I want an incident report. He interfered with official HOA operations. The officer took out a small notebook. I can document what everyone is reporting. Linda nodded as if she had finally regained control. Then she began explaining everything. She stated that she had taken the cart from my property for an HOA inspection, driven it to the clubhouse, parked it, and discovered afterward that it would no longer drive. I stood there quietly while the officer wrote. Linda did not seem to notice what she had just done. She had spent days refusing to admit that my permission mattered. Now, because she wanted an official complaint against me, she had voluntarily described the entire trip to a neutral witness. When the officer finished, he read the basic timeline back to us. Linda confirmed it. Thomas slowly looked toward me. I closed my folder. The camera had recorded her taking the cart. The GPS had recorded where she drove it. My email proved she had been warned. Now her own incident report connected every piece together. By Monday evening, Linda's incident report had become the most useful document in my folder. Thomas Reed called an emergency board meeting at the clubhouse, and when I arrived, the air conditioning was running hard enough to make the room feel 20 degrees colder than the Florida parking lot outside. Linda sat at the head of the table in her pale blue HOA polo with a leather binder open in front of her. Thomas sat to her right, along with board members Patricia Moore and Gary Sullivan. The security officer's written report rested in the center of the table. I took the chair opposite Linda and placed my gray ownership envelope beside my phone. She started before Thomas could finish calling the meeting to order. "This is about deliberate interference with an official inspection." Thomas looked at her. "First, we are establishing whether the association had authority to use Ryan's cart." Linda leaned back. "We have already discussed operational necessity. That is not a covenant section." Thomas opened the governing documents. I checked. Linda's expression changed by half an inch. That was enough. Patricia asked me to explain the timeline, so I kept it simple. I showed the purchase record and serial number first, then the security footage from the first unauthorized trip, the second trip, Tuesday morning, finally Saturday. For separate dates appeared on the screen. Each camera timestamp matched the corresponding GPS history. I placed my written no permission notice beside Linda's response claiming reasonable access. Gary read both pages without speaking. Then Thomas picked up the incident report. "Linda, you told security that you took the cart from Ryan's property at approximately 8:42, drove it here for an inspection, parked it, and afterward discovered it would not operate. Is that accurate?" She hesitated. "In general, yes." "So the cart was already parked when Ryan disabled it?" "That is not the point." I opened the manufacturer status log. 8:49, stationary. 8:50, security lock activated. Patricia looked at me. "Could that feature stop the cart while someone was driving?" "I did not use it while the cart was moving. I waited until the system showed 0 speed and the cart had remained parked." Linda tapped her fingers against the binder. "He engineered this entire situation." I shook my head. "I parked my property in my driveway. You came onto my property and took it after receiving written notice not to." The room went quiet. Thomas turned several pages in the governing documents. "I cannot find any provision allowing officers to use privately owned vehicles or equipment without permission." Gary nodded. Patricia did too. Linda looked from one board member to another. "Presidents have discretionary authority." Thomas closed the document. "Not authority that does not exist." Then he made a motion suspending any claimed practice of using homeowner equipment without express written permission and referring Linda's recent enforcement actions against me for independent review. Patricia seconded it. The vote passed. Linda stared at the table. I never raised my voice. I never needed to. The cart had recorded its route. The camera had recorded who took it. The email had recorded my refusal. And Linda, determined to make me look guilty, had created the document that confirmed the final piece herself. The independent review took 9 days, and Linda spent every one of them acting as if the outcome had already been decided in her favor. She still attended board meetings, still drove the association cart, and still smiled when she passed my house. But something had changed. She no longer slowed near my driveway. On Wednesday afternoon, Thomas called while I was replacing a charging controller at a golf course west of Orlando. The maintenance shed smelled like warm rubber and cut grass, and I could hear sprinklers ticking beyond the open door. "Ryan," he said, "we finished reviewing the enforcement notices. I set my voltage meter on the bench, and the trailer citations were not supported by the published parking rules. The workbench notice did not identify an enforceable violation. The mulch bag warning was never entered through the normal management process." I looked across the shed at the rows of carts waiting for service. "So they are withdrawn? All of them?" That evening, the board sent a community notice clarifying that HOA officers could not use privately owned vehicles, tools, equipment, utilities, or other personal property without express permission except where a governing document or genuine emergency clearly provided lawful authority. Linda's name was nowhere in the notice, but everyone knew why it existed. The bigger meeting came Saturday. Nearly 40 homeowners filled the clubhouse, more than I had ever seen attend anything that did not involve dues increases or hurricane preparation. I sat near the back. Linda stood at the front beside Thomas, dressed in a cream blouse and white slacks, trying to wear the same expression she had used for years when issuing warnings from behind a clipboard. Thomas summarized the review without turning it into a spectacle. Multiple unauthorized uses of privately owned equipment. Written notice ignored. Unsupported enforcement actions. A claimed operational authority that could not be located in the governing documents. Then he explained that a formal leadership vote would proceed under the association's rules. Linda asked to speak. I have spent 3 years protecting this community, she said. Every decision I made was intended to preserve standards. Someone behind me whispered, including Ryan's golf cart? A few people laughed, but Thomas immediately brought the room back to order. Linda looked directly at me. This entire controversy exists because one homeowner chose escalation over cooperation. I stood only when Thomas recognized me. I told you not to use my card, I said. In writing, Linda started to answer, but I continued. You used it anyway. For recorded trips. That is not cooperation. That is ignoring the answer because you did not like it. I sat down. Nothing else needed explaining. The vote followed the procedures in the bylaws. By the end of the meeting, Linda was no longer president. Thomas was appointed interim president until the next scheduled election, and the board formally adopted the written permission policy. Outside, my dark blue cart was still sitting in the clubhouse parking space where the whole mess had finally become official. I opened the manufacturer app. Security lock active. Linda walked past without looking at me. I waited until she reached her vehicle, then tapped restore operation. The cart gave one soft electronic chime. Display ready. Drive system enabled. I slipped the phone into my pocket and turned the key. After days of arguments about authority, the simplest fact in Pinebrook Lakes was glowing on that dashboard. The cart answered to its owner. Driving that cart home felt almost disappointingly normal. The electric motor gave its familiar low hum as I followed Cypress Bend Drive beneath the palms, passing the community pool, the mailboxes, and the same carefully trimmed lawns Linda had spent years inspecting from behind a clipboard. Nothing dramatic happened. Nobody chased me. Nobody applauded. I turned into my driveway, parked beside the garage, and watched the dashboard go dark when I removed the key. For the first time in weeks, the cart was exactly where it belonged. Over the next month, Pinebrook Lakes became quieter in ways I had not expected. The board canceled every unsupported violation connected to my trailer, workbench, and landscaping materials. Homeowners received the new written permission policy, and Thomas asked the management company to route future enforcement notices through the normal review process instead of allowing one officer to treat personal judgment like community law. Linda still lived 3 streets away. I occasionally saw her white sport utility vehicle near the clubhouse, but she was no longer circling the neighborhood in the association cart with a clipboard beside her. When we passed each other, she usually looked straight ahead. I was perfectly comfortable with that arrangement. My life went back to battery. Testers, charging systems, worn tires, wiring diagrams, and early mornings at golf courses around Orlando. The dark blue cart went back to hauling tools, bags of mulch, and whatever else I needed around the property. I added one small habit. Every night, I took the key inside with me. Not because Linda had defeated the security system. She had never understood it in the first place. I simply decided that a locked door was easier than another board meeting. One Saturday afternoon, I was cleaning the utility bed when Thomas stopped by. He looked at the cart and laughed. Hard to believe that thing caused all this. I shook my head. It did not. He raised an eyebrow. Linda caused it. The cart just kept records. After he left, I opened the manufacturer app one last time and looked through the saved trip history. For unauthorized trips. For routes through Pinebrook Lakes. For sets of timestamps that match my cameras. Then there was the security log from that Saturday morning. 8:49, stationary. 8:50, immobilized. 8:57, attempted operation. Every line was boring by itself. Together, they told the story better than I ever could. I exported the final records, saved them with the incident report and the board decision, then closed the folder. The garage smelled like rubber and warm Florida air. Sprinklers clicked somewhere across the street. I put my tools back on the wall and looked at the cart sitting quietly under the garage light. Linda had believed the clever part was the button on my phone. It was not. The button only stopped a park machine from leaving again. What stopped her was everything she did before and after I pressed it. Taking property she had been told not to take, leaving a digital trail, demanding an official report, and then confirming the timeline herself because she was certain her title made her right. I never had to trap her. I never had to damage anything. I never even had to raise my voice. I just let her create the evidence, waited until my cart was safely parked, and pressed one button after she was done.